Good morning, everybody and anybody. It's getting colder. But that doesn't really mean a lot. You can still ride. So this video is about what is cold weather riding, realistically, and how do you dress to actually be able to ride in it comfortably. Because on one end of the spectrum, you've got being hardcore, but then you also have stupid. And it's a very fine line, and I've come really close and possibly even over the line into, wait a minute, I gotta go this way, into stupid. I want to talk a little bit about what is a realistic temperature for cold weather riders. And as always, there are so many variables to this subject. There are so many things that are going to hinge these things one way or the other, from what kind of bike you're riding and how much wind protection you have to where you actually live. But hopefully this can give you just kind of a platform that you can build off of, just kind of a basic neutral area to go from. First off, what is cold weather riding? What is a realistic temperature that you can actually go out and ride? I've ridden at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is cold. And definitely aims more towards the idea of stupid. Now you can ride in that kind of weather. However, that's the kind of weather that you might be able to go out for like a 5-10 minute ride. You'll be able to look at the weather and say, you know what, I'll be okay. The roads can be dry at 0 degrees. I do go through some precautions when I want to ride when it's that cold, and it is not typical. A realistic temperature for cold weather riding is around 35. You'll be able to commute in 35 degrees. It's above freezing and you can avoid most of the possibilities for ice. Now at 35 degrees, you're still going to be risking a certain amount. You're gonna have to be aware of shady spots on the road. You're gonna have to be aware of elevation differences because it gets colder sometimes the higher you get up. So like if I'm gonna go out to those mountains over there and it's 35 degrees, here it's probably a lot colder up there. The problem with riding in, let's say, 20 degrees. 20 degrees is not too cold to ride. I've ridden in 20 degrees, it's comfortable. But these are rides that, like, I'm going out and if the weather starts to shift, I get my butt back home. I'm talking mostly about commuting, actually riding your bike to work or whatever. If you're stuck at work, you can't just head back home. You might look out the window and be like, holy smokes, it's snowing. This is bad. And the next thing you know, you're riding home in the snow. And there's still a possibility that that could happen at 35 degrees. Your problem-free cold weather riding is probably going to be realistically more in the 40s range. And again, that's not to say that you can't go ride when it's 0 degrees out or 10 degrees out, but you will run into some problems. Now you might say, well, I only commute like 5 miles to work. That's not worth getting all geared up and riding to work for 5 miles. And the good thing is that 35, 40 degrees, that's not a hard temperature to dress for and be comfortable on a bike. It's not hard at all. Right now, it's like 37 degrees. And I feel like I'm like in a car, you know? I'm like, oh yeah, this is nice. So if you're going to go out and ride in kind of an extreme cold weather, you know, around 20 degrees, 10 degrees, 0 degrees, and you can look at the weather and keep an eye on it, that's not a problem. I do that all the time in the wintertime. One thing that I always do when it's that temperature is I always drive my route before I ride it. So I'll drive in the car the entire way, the entire circle or whatever I'm doing with the car before I take the bike out. I never just hop on the bike and say, hey, let's just hope the roads are dry. So now that we've established that, let's get into actually how you dress for the weather, what you wear, what you gotta get, and what works.
So keeping this simple, you can wear really as many layers as you want, but there are actually only about 3 different types of layers. You have your base layer, you have your mid layer, and you have your outer layer. Now starting with your base layer, you typically want your base layer to have 2 different attributes. The first attribute, the most important, is moisture wicking. You want it to absorb any type of moisture that your body puts out, any type of sweat or anything. And secondly, ideally you want it to add just a little bit of warmth. If you can get any one of these layers to do more than 2 jobs, that's going to give you the ideal setup. And typically the go-tos for this base layer is usually something like silk. You can also use bamboo, or you can use what's considered to be really good is merino wool, because it's moisture wicking and it's also warm. It can also keep you cool when it starts to get warm. Now for me, the mid layer is actually the hardest one to actually get right, because this is what's going to give you your warmth. It doesn't have to really have any other special properties other than warmth. Now me personally, I actually use polyester for this, but you can also use wool, or really even just a thin jacket. And if you want to double up on this mid layer, you can actually put on something that's like a windbreaker that adds a bit of warmth and can actually help your last layer. The last one is the outer layer. Now the outer layer to me is the most important one, because if you don't get this one right, nothing that you did before is even going to work at all. The trick to your outer layer is to block the wind. And the more wind that you block, the warmer you're going to be. You can usually use some actual motorcycle gear, something that's a cold weather gear, something that has a longer jacket, something that's not short like a sports riding jacket. Leather also works really good for this. Most of your riding jackets actually will do this pretty well, but if you need a little bit more, you can actually put on a rain suit, and that actually will help block the wind as well. I actually see a lot of people wearing their rain pants, but not really their rain jacket for this. Now there are a couple things that you want to actually try to avoid if you're trying to discover your setup. First thing that you want to avoid is you want to avoid really, really thick jackets. It's easy to just have a go-to jacket that's just really warm, but it's just super thick. And what this is going to do is it's going to make it to where you can't actually move as well on the bike. You won't be able to do head checks. You won't be able to move very well. You're going to be uncomfortable. And the same amount of warmth can actually be achieved by doing a couple thinner layers. Another thing that you want to avoid is overdressing. When you overdress, you can get actually too warm. And if your moisture wicking base layer isn't up to par, I guess, you can start to get sweaty and you're uncomfortable, and that can also contribute to being cold as well. Okay, now as far as some of these accessories that you can get to stay warm, here's just a Klein balaclava. This is actually really nice because it's got a really good windbreaker down here on your neck. The downside to this is that it can restrict your head movement. Just by tightening up as you turn your head, it just encompasses everything and doesn't allow for a lot of movement unless you stretch it all out. Another option is just having something that you can just put around your neck. The nice thing about these is that they don't restrict your head movement at all, yet they will still keep your neck warm. Another nice thing to get is just some actual cold weather riding gloves. I have heated grips on my bike as well as some hand guards, and with these I actually do just fine. If your hands are still cold after that, I would suggest that you look into the motorcycle handlebar muffs or hippo hands. It's basically the same thing, but you could look into that. Those apparently work pretty good, but I haven't actually tried them. Now, keeping your feet warm, to me, that is the most difficult. When it gets really, really cold, when my feet get cold, I just go home. But I do have a friend of mine that actually, he just puts the hand warmers on the top of his toes when he rides to work, and he says that that does really good. I've never actually tried that, and I'll probably give it a shot this winter just to see how well it works. Now, if your setup is less than perfect, don't give up. Here is a trick that you can use to actually make whatever you're using possibly work better. And it's a very simple trick. All you got to do is don't get dressed in your house. The process of getting all of this gear on, you can generate a lot of heat. And if you're putting all that stuff on in a 60 to 70 degree house, you're going to overheat, you're going to sweat, you're going to be uncomfortable, it's going to make you colder. You're going to say, hey, I need more layers. You'll put on more layers in the 60 to 70 degree house, you'll sweat more, you'll go ride, you'll be colder, and it's just a cycle that goes so on and so on. So grab your gear, take your gear outside, put it on your bike, let your bike warm up when it's cold, and get dressed outside. Go outside with well, as little as legally possible, I guess. Like if I'm going to go somewhere, I just wear jeans and I wear my t-shirt. I'm cold when I get out to the garage, but as I start putting layers on, I start to warm up a bit. I'm even still a little bit chilly as I head out the door on the bike. But even riding down the road, you'll warm up if you're dry. So if you don't do that already, give that a shot. It might actually improve the setup that you have now. I know that it improves mine. This winter, I'm hoping to actually do something called a Goodwill challenge, where I'm going to go down to Goodwill. I'm going to try to find every layer that I need, everything except probably the outer motorcycle gear, which is almost a necessity in my opinion. But go down to Goodwill and get everything that I need, and then go and try it out and see how much it actually costs to actually buy everything that you need. So stay tuned for that if you're interested, and we'll try to make that happen if there's some rideable days this winter. Well, hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully this gives you a good starting point to figure out your winter setup. Stay warm out there, and we'll see you next time. Or, what's the other one?
Hey, are you famous?
No.
But as I put layers on, I start to,
Welcome to Big Fork. Big Fork. You know, like big knife, big spoon, big fork. Who comes up with these names? I don't know. It's just weird. It's a weird name. What should we call this place? Big Fork.